Welcome to the fourth and final workshop of our mentor program. I am so sad that this is our final workshop, but I'm so excited for you all to jump into this final workshop. We've got a lot to cover this evening. We've got an amazing guest speaker for you this evening. I think you're going to really enjoy this. Now, this workshop is all about how to make the most out of that first internship. How do you make the most of that first internship or first job? Maybe you're jumping into a full-time job, you're a senior, you're graduating. Maybe you're hopefully jumping into an internship. Even if you're not jumping into an internship, maybe you're working on a part-time job that you want to make the most out of for the summer. That's okay too. This workshop is all about how can you make the most out of that first opportunity over the summer so that you can really set yourself apart. By the way, if you have a part-time job and you don't have an internship, there are plenty of ways that you can go about setting yourself apart in that part-time job that could lead to internships down the road. Seriously, do not settle and do not sell yourself short for the network that you could create from any particular opportunity. I know that I could tell you that back in the day when I was a server and bartender, I met plenty of people that ultimately opened up doors for opportunities that I ended up taking advantage of later. You never know who you will meet, even in the jobs you think are not your main thing. It's understandable, but leverage it. Don't ever write any potential connection off. So, as you all know, my name's Garrett. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. This workshop's going to be about 50 minutes long. Please ask any questions you have. If you have any questions in the comments section, as you all know, I'm gonna ask 3 questions during the duration of this workshop. Your job is to answer them within 24 hours of this workshop going live. I don't necessarily know exactly what the questions are going to be. I always prompt them based on our guest speaker. Sometimes I'll slip in an intro question during this segment here. It just depends how I'm feeling for the day. So I'm so excited for you all to jump in, learn from our guest this evening. I'm so excited to learn your answers to the questions that we ask you, and I'm so excited to engage with you all. Now, I really want to set the expectations. As you all know, you're not going to get an internship handed to you on a silver platter. That's just not how this program works. Now, by the way, have students landed opportunities at Google, major investment banks, major engineering firms, major marketing firms? Absolutely, happens all the time. And have they done that as a result of meeting with their mentor, taking advantage of the things that they've learned through this program? Yeah, absolutely. But if you think this is going to get handed to you on a silver platter, I think you already know by now that's just not how this program works. You have to work for the things that you get. Now, this platform can be a springboard for you to get to where you want to be. Leverage this as an opportunity to really launch your early career path. Absolutely, yes, this is something that can really do make a huge impact on you getting to where you want to be. But this is not a handout. This is not something that is just given to you. This program could be critical to you really setting yourself apart compared to your peers. Take advantage of it. I really think that you're going to enjoy what we have to say in this workshop this evening. Now, I really want to talk about the intentionality of feelings, because here's the thing. At the end of the day, how you make someone feel in a given moment is going to really impact how they feel about you down the line. So I want you to just take a quick moment on a piece of paper or on your phone. I want you to identify, how do you want other people to feel about you? So when you're going into that first job, that first internship, that first part-time job, how do you want your boss? How do you want your colleagues? How do you want your peers? How do you want other people to feel about you? Write it in the comment section. Write it down on a piece of paper. I want to know, how do you want other people to feel about you? Because that intentionality is so key. It is so key, because here's the thing. If you don't write this down, if you don't set out an intention for how you want other people to feel about you, they are going to perceive you in any which way that you may feel on that given day. And that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. If you're having an off day and you're thinking to yourself like, oh man, I'm having a rough day, you can let that spew onto other people. It happens all the time. And people come up with excuses for it. You might say, hey, my dog died earlier today, or I just found out my grandma's got cancer, having a rough day. And don't get me wrong, there's not an excuse for having a rough day, but you've got to be able to realize that as a professional, you've got to put on multiple different hats to get yourself in the zone to make the most out of it. So no matter what's going on with your world, you can't let your personal world affect your business world. And if you do, it's going to potentially negatively impact the way that other people feel about you. But if you set an intention right now about how you want other people to feel about you, you're going to put yourself in a much better situation. If you think to yourself, I want people to think about me as dependable and reliable and someone that's always upbeat, confident, and excited when it comes to work. It doesn't matter what's going on with your outside world. Even if the worst thing could have possibly happened in your outside personal world, if you set yourself an intention right now that that's how you want other people to feel about you, when you come into work, you're going to straighten yourself up because you've already identified, I don't want people to feel sad, bad, or like that I'm a charity case because I've got other things going on in my outside world. You want other people to feel like you are a rock, that you are someone that they can go to, that you are someone that's always showing up professionally. Boom. You will get yourself into the mindset ready to be successful. Now that leads to the 3 keys that we cover in every workshop for success in this mentor program, which is strategy, story, and state. And as I just said, it doesn't matter what's going on in your outside world. It doesn't matter what the state of the world is. If you are a rock, if you are someone that physically comes into a state conducive for being successful every single time, you will be successful. I promise you that. So I want to do right now is I want to get you into a state conducive for being successful. I want you to stand up. And I want you to shake it loose. I want you to shimmy it out. I want you to let it go. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. On the count of 3, scream 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out. Let it loose. Let it go. You're getting yourself pumping. You're getting blood flowing to your brain. You're releasing endorphins. You're getting yourself ready to be successful. The reason why that is so key is because no matter what is going on in your world, you can drive your emotions with your motions. Your motions drive your emotions, meaning that if you get out, you move, you do a power pose, you get crazy, you can get yourself in a state conducive for other people wanting to be around you. You can get yourself feeling good, even if you don't want to feel good. Even if you think to yourself, I just want to remorse for a little bit. I just want to be sad for a little bit. You can be sad on your own time, but when it comes to work time, you step your game up. And the way that you step your game up is you get your emotions and you turn them into positive emotions. I can tell you that right now. Even when you don't want to feel on your best self, your emotions can get yourself into an emotional state conducive for being successful, even if it's only for a temporary period of time. I promise you, your emotions, getting moving, getting running, getting going, getting just shaken out will get yourself successful. And that will be a huge catalyst for you being successful on the job, standing apart from other people. Because everyone else is going to wonder, like, man, how are you able to stay upbeat, positive, just like a go-to person every single time while other people are taking sick days or just having off days? And you can tell, everyone can tell. It's because you are making an intention to be that way before you come into work every single day. It's critical. Now, the next key is your story. What's the story you tell yourself? Now, that's a big point of the intentionality. What is the story you tell yourself for why you're going to be successful? If you're telling yourself a negative story like, hey, you know what, I don't deserve to be here, I'm not qualified, I'm just honestly, I don't even know why I'm in the room. If that's the story you tell yourself, that is the outcome that will be perceived by other people. But if you tell yourself a story, man, I can do this, I can make an impact, I can learn from these people, I can engage, I can be the energetic person who does what it takes, works the hardest to get to where I need to be. If you come in with that mentality, you can be successful. Now, the last key is your strategy. What are you going to do to make sure that you set yourself apart from your peers? Now, there's a few things that we talk about with our guest speaker, but there's a few things that I would love to discuss with you right now. The first one is what is focal is causal. This is popularized by the work of Dr. Robert Cialdini. Essentially, what it means is that whatever is seen is perceived, which means that it is all optics. By that, I mean, if your supervisor, if your boss, if your CEO sees you showing up early for work, working hard on projects, taking initiative, they will attribute the success of the entire intern team to you. But if they see you on your phone, on social media, doing something lazy, just doing things that are not, like spreading gossip at the water cooler, not working when you should be working, anything that could be perceived as negative, if they see that, they will perceive that just as likely as they do the hardworking stuff. So it is really critical that whatever people see about you, whoever you want to make sure that you impress, that they see the type of person that you want to portray, and that they do not see the type of person you do not want to portray. You will think to yourself, man, I wonder how does XYZ person get promoted over another person? I can tell you how. It's that they are seen doing good work while the other people are not seen doing good work. Make sure that you're seen doing good work. In fact, what I always find the most interesting about this research of Dr. Robert Cialdini is its extrapolation to other areas of life. specifically as, you know, I don't know if any of you all are holed up right now for coronavirus and sitting inside watching television, but what he's observed in his research is that when cameras, especially in police interrogations, are facing any particular person, whether that be the police officer or the suspect, when the camera is facing the person, one particular person, a jury is much more likely to attribute negative feelings towards that person if the camera is facing them. So if a camera is facing a suspect in an interrogation, the jury is much more likely to attribute guilt on the party of the suspect than they are to think that the cop is asking leading questions, trying to get an answer that may not actually exist. However, flip it around. When the camera is facing the police officer, not the suspect, the likelihood that the jury is going to think that the cop, the police officer, is asking leading questions, trying to get an answer that may not actually be essentially the guilt of the person who's under interrogation, it essentially increases substantially more. The point I'm trying to make is that when what people see is what they perceive. So at the end of the day, if God forbid you're ever in a police interrogation situation and you notice that the camera is rolling, at the best you want to make sure that the camera is side by side equally to you both, or not facing you and facing the police officer. It's crazy how much of an impact that has on how people perceive other people. But more importantly, as it pertains to the workplace, make sure that people see you doing good work and not see you doing bad work. It's not a tit for tat type of thing. One bad deed is about 10 good deeds worth. You have to really, really make sure that you're not seen doing anything bad, or you are going to be on the shit list of your supervisor. And that's not a place you want to be. So the next thing that I want to talk about is this theory called the next in line theory. Essentially what this says is that when somebody is talking or about to speak, their likelihood of retaining any information before or after their speech is very low. So if you know that your supervisor is about to give a presentation, or someone that you really look up to, maybe you are about to see a keynote speaker, you're thinking to yourself, I love this keynote speaker, I love what he or she has to say, I want to go up to him or her after their speech. Bad idea. Here's why. People, when they speak, are much more likely to think about what they just said if they just finished giving a speech, or what they're about to say if they're about to give a speech. Their likelihood of retaining any new information is very minimal. So therefore, you need to give the person you're trying to make a positive impression to a leeway period before you bring up new information to them, because that will increase the likelihood that your message is actually going to resonate in their mind. But if you come up to them right before a speech or right after a speech that they just gave or are about to give, their likelihood of remembering what you said, very low. So just something to keep in mind. This also applies to a boss who's giving a speech, any colleague that's giving a speech, anybody who's about to speak publicly for anything. Make sure you don't talk to them immediately before or afterwards, because they're not going to remember what you said. So the last thing that I want to touch on is this concept called matching and mirroring. This is a great key for building rapport in the workplace, especially for someone who's got negative body language. So I think we've touched on this before in the past, but you should not have your arms crossed when you're at the workplace. It conveys that you're closed off and that you're not open to learning new information. But there's a lot of people that have bad body language in the workplace. There's going to be a lot of people that will cross their arms to you. Can you cross back? The answer is yes. And I know this might sound crazy, but people feel a subconscious connection to others that they are similar to. And this can be in your mannerisms and your speed of speech. Not your dialect of speech, but your speed of speech. So if somebody has a very thick Southern accent and you try to emulate that Southern accent, but you don't actually have a Southern accent, they're going to sniff that out immediately. It's going to be perceived as inauthentic. But if someone's talking really quickly and you're saying, I'm going to work on that, boss, I'm going to make sure I get that done, I'm going to work on it right away, they're going to think to themselves like, man, here's a sense of urgency, someone who's really with it. That's awesome. But instead, if you respond by saying, yeah, boss, I will get to it, and I will make sure that I get those assignments complete, they're going to be thinking to themselves, what the heck is wrong with this kid? Like, what, does he not like get it? The sense of urgency? It's crazy how your speed of speech is actually perceived so similar together. So if you notice that someone talks really quickly or really slowly, following their speed of speech, matching and mirroring their speed of speech can actually help you build rapport with them. The other key is other body language. So like I said, crossing your arms. If someone's playing with their chin, you can play with your chin. Don't try to be overly obvious about it, but you can do it subtly. So if someone's playing with their ear, you can play with your ear. And I know it may sound crazy, but you can try this with a friend who's never heard this before. Go up to them, see if they've got any mannerisms. Maybe they're using their hands like this a lot. Emulate those hand gestures, and then all of a sudden introduce a new gesture. All of a sudden, maybe start playing with your nose. It could be any gesture, honestly. Start playing with your nose. Do it. First, emulate their hand gestures for about 5 minutes. Then introduce a new gesture. Watch what happens. They're going to start playing with their nose. They're going to start emulating the new gesture that you have now introduced. It's crazy. It's fascinating how it works, but it builds rapport between other people in the work environment. I think those are some really critical tips for you to know. The last thing that I want to leave you with is the 30 and 90-day rule. The 30-day rule is for an internship. When you first get into an internship, this is, by the way, this was, by the way, a Fortune 500 CEO taught me this tip. And that was, when you first go into an internship, meet with your supervisor and ask him or her the question, what did the best intern you ever have do to set themselves apart? On the very first day, ask that question. They're going to tell you exactly what they want you to do to set yourself apart. For the next 30 days, go ahead and do it. Don't complain. Don't ask questions. Don't share any professional goals you've got for yourself. Just go ahead, put your head down, work hard. After 30 days, you have built credibility with this person. You can then say, hey, boss, would you be open to having a conversation? I would love to share with you some of my professional goals. Boom. That's where you share some of your professional goals. That's where you say, hey, I'm interested in connecting with people in these areas or these types of fields or these types of industries. And because you've earned credibility, they will help you get there. Why? Because you've earned that credibility. But if on day one you ask for that and you've earned no credibility, they're not going to do it. Or if they do, they're going to only do it on a light version. You're not going to get the full force of how they could possibly help connect you. That is something that's really critical. 90-day rule is the exact same thing, but for a full-time job. You get a little bit longer to really build that credibility with your supervisor and your employer. So those are key tips. The last thing I want to just really mention is really starting to help you get into a routine. I know that the best way to learn anything is to actually teach it. So what I want you to do is I want you to find somebody. This could be a friend. It could be a peer. It could be a classmate. It could be anybody. Teach them something that you learned in this program. Teach them anything you learned in this program. We know that students who tell at least, we know that students who tell at least 20 people something that they learned in this program, that their likelihood of landing the job, the internship, getting to a graduate degree increases exponentially. We know that the more people a student tells, the more likely they're able to do that. What we've identified as 20 is that magic number. And this doesn't necessarily have to be you teaching them a full seminar of anything we taught. It could be literally you bringing up casually in conversation, like, hey, I learned about this thing called matching and mirroring. It's really fascinating. Boom, that's it. That's one person. Or multiple people if you're in a group. But what we've learned is that the more people you tell, the more likely you are actually going to retain this information, the more likely you are going to actually apply it into your professional life, and the more likely you are actually to achieve the goals you have set for yourself professionally. It's crazy how it works. It's a network effect. It really does make an impact. So I want to challenge you that after this workshop, you go out, you identify a friend, you teach them something you learned in this program, and its likelihood of sticking increases exponentially. I really want to challenge you to do that. This is our final workshop. I'm really excited for what you are able to accomplish over the summer. I would really encourage you to be in the program next semester. You're going to get a new mentor. We're going to have new speakers. We're going to talk about new content. I think you're going to really enjoy it and really springboard your career into another level. I think you're going to really enjoy that. Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of this workshop. I look forward to seeing you all in the next part. Welcome to our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to get started and talk about how we can best prep for that first job or that first internship. How can we put ourselves in the best position to thrive and succeed at that first job or internship? Because I know it's pretty nerve-wracking, especially if it's our first job or our first internship. We might be thinking to ourselves, like, how can we impress? Maybe we've got COVID restrictions, so we're not able to even come into the office. Maybe we're doing everything remotely or virtually. There's a lot of things that aren't normal about the scenario that we are in right now. We've got an incredible guest with us here this evening to talk about how we can best put ourselves in the best position to thrive and succeed in our first job and internship. His name is Nat Norris. Nat is the Vice President of Marketing and Information Technology at Central Restaurant Products. He's a marketing and technology executive who excels at combining data-driven methodology with customer centricity. Nat, thanks for being here.
Hey, Garrett, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm excited to talk about it. And now I feel a little pressure here. There's a long list of challenges that we're facing today, especially for those who are entering the job market and the internship. Hopefully I can give some insight, after these questions and maybe even some insight back to you, maybe I'll learn something.
Absolutely. I think that's the funnest part. As long as we've got that open mind, that's the most beneficial part to all of these workshops. But before we jump into the advice on how we can make the most out of that first job or internship, I would love, Nat, would you mind if you just shared a little bit of your story and how you got into the work that you're doing today, just so that students can get an idea of what your career progression was?
Sure. Yeah. I'd be very happy to share here. And, Garrett, for me, very non-traditional. So I'll talk a little bit about that too. So I'm currently the Vice President of Marketing and IT here, and we're a wholesale distributor. And, I've had the luxury to work for a relatively small company. The career path in small companies are typically not well defined. Startups, really, everybody's just doing everything and kind of running around like crazy. So for me, I've had, a chance to kind of prove myself and and ask for what's next, and like, hey, how do I get to this next step, or what does that next step even look like? And for me, I'm excited to talk about some of the challenges that I've had to get to where I'm at today, and what are some of the the tips and some things that I probably shouldn't have done that could have been really disastrous, but overall I think the everything I'm going to talk about really talks about, asking good questions and having really good communication. And hopefully, through these questions that you guys can kind of see that kind of that theme.
So what was your very first job or internship?
Oh, sure. So my very first job, I actually worked in, financial sales. I graduated with a degree in economics and finance. I moved here to Indianapolis. I worked for a firm that was not here. So I was remote, before remote was, I guess, the new normal, if you will. The challenge for me, I was kind of put out in the territory. I didn't know anybody, so it was really tough. You add into sales on top of that, and really selling a wide variety of products, financial products, to a wide variety of people at different stages of their life. And so the real challenge for me, I wasn't in those stages, and so not being in those stages made it really tough to kind of understand where that customer is coming from. And, not having that customer centricity made that job extremely difficult. And, that job didn't last very long. I actually ended up doing a gig of bartending at night. And this is so fresh out of college here. And I got into the restaurant business. And, honestly, I had a lot of fun in that job. That job turned into actually helping open another restaurant here, like a locally owned here in Indianapolis. And then as I continued to transition on, that job turned into a management job. After opening up, got to see kind of the ins and outs of the operation. But odd hours, and starting a family, getting married. I started looking for that 9-to-5 gig, if you want to think of it that way. And for me, having the opportunity to work at Central Restaurant Products, I started out in sales, back to the sales side of things. I end up looking at an opportunity or getting an opportunity to work in the product side, so product development. So not only did I sell the product before, now I'm actually helping the company source and understand which products, can help our customers the best. And from there, it just progressed on to marketing. And I got a great story about that. I'll tell that here in a little bit. But I went from the marketing side, and then from the marketing side, there was a need for somebody to help with IT. And in the marketing side, I'd always worked in marketing technology, analytics, advertising, digital advertising. And so it seemed like, when we were shorthanded in that department, I had the opportunity to say, hey, let's try it out. And since then, I've had the opportunity to lead both the IT side as well as the marketing side. Very different dynamics, but it's been a great journey so far and a lot of learning.
That's awesome. I love so many key components of your story. I love how, one, you were able to identify out of that first job that you had, the financial job, that it wasn't the right fit for you, and you were able to take a step back and learn from it. The other thing that I loved was that, although perhaps kind of the way that you described it, you almost kind of, the way that you treated it was almost like that bartending job almost seemed at that time in your life, perhaps in your mind, like as a temporary stop until the next best thing. But I loved the way that you took opportunities and ran with them. It seemed like throughout your career, throughout your life, there were scenarios where perhaps it wasn't necessarily the company coming to you and saying, hey, we need someone to do this. Could you do this? It wasn't necessarily like obvious. The writing wasn't necessarily on the wall, but it almost sounded like you saw opportunities where things weren't going the greatest, and you decided to jump in and say, how can I help? I'm here to do something. Let's give this a try. Is that correct? Would you say that's a pretty accurate assessment of kind of like how things progress for you?
Yeah, Gary, that's very fair. There has been a lot of opportunity and times where I see that, something wasn't working quite the right way, or there was this could be done better, or really just somebody needs help, and just being key to that and trying to figure out where you can, what role do you take in that situation? A lot of people may come in with, guns a-blazing. Hey, I can take this over and I can do this. Sometimes that's not quite the right avenue. Sometimes you got to have some flexibility. Sometimes you got to have a role to say, hey, I'm here to support whatever you need, be empathetic. And we're here together to try to make this work out the best way possible. And, I think that having the ability for me to kind of know when I need to get in there and somebody's looking for just some direction, I can help there. I'm not an IT person by trade, so leading IT is not my comfort zone most of the time. But I can understand when people need help and how I can help them. And, I take a lesser role there and just really just bulldoze stuff out of their way so they can actually get to to solving the problem. Whereas on the marketing side, I have a pretty good sense with my degree in economics and finance that I know about return on ad spend or return on investment, and I can better kind of steer the team, from a higher level to say, this is where we should be really working towards on making our dollars go the furthest. And, so it's kind of a teeter totter, and it's definitely different. But, having the time to take a step back and look at it and then try to decide is something I practice every day. I like to take action, but there's also a time that you got to just, assess the situation and, kind of ready, aim, and fire instead of ready, fire, aim, and just take that extra second to figure out exactly where you want to do or where you can help out. Right.
I think what is the saying? Perfection is the enemy of progress.
Completely.
Sounds like ready, fire, aim is very much in line with that sentiment. One thing that I am kind of observing about your story that I find to be really fascinating, and I think this is a really golden nugget to potentially take away, is it seems like in your first job, in that financial analysis job, you're like, okay, this isn't the right fit for me. You were able to swiftly move into the next job, which was bartending. But it seemed like when adversity hit, or when you were almost maybe at a spot where you're like, I don't know what the next growth step is, as opposed to turning in and running and trying to find a next move, you leaned into the restaurant industry. You leaned into, okay, I'm already in this. How can I leverage this experience or this expertise to expand it further, as opposed to trying to jump to the next role? And I find that, one, very admirable, but two, very fascinating, because I think it's a very different mentality. I think I see a lot of times, not necessarily young people, but I often see this sometimes with young people, where it's like you get that first layer of adversity, or if there's any uncertainty as to what the next rung on the ladder is going to be, it's like, well, then clearly there's not a ladder or a rung there. I'm going to have to jet and move to the next role. Not to say that's necessarily a right or a wrong thing, but I guess I would imagine it was probably very rewarding to kind of find those next rungs, even when they were diamonds in the rough, maybe when they weren't so clear what the next ladder would be. How did you kind of mentally prepare for that?
Oh, that's a great question, and I agree with you. And there is no right or wrong. I've talked to a lot of people, and I've had the opportunity to kind of lead some people, and it works in both cases work well. But you really got to know what the company is about or the opportunity is about, and if you're comfortable with that, I think that really, I think you have to be diligent on making that decision whether that's the right fit for you or not. Fit works both ways. For me, I'm not, I'm not risk adverse. I can take risk, calculated risk specifically. And so, when I don't see the next rung, I do know what the need is, right? And then, you can, my boss today, my president today always talks about, you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. And, to me, that this is kind of one of those situations where you're taking care of the basic things that are the needs and the foundations. And then when you need to create some organization or some structure, let's do that. And that's when positions get created, really, that positions weren't there before. However, it's also comforting to know that there is a well-defined career path. Those who have a good task orientation or have a good follow-on logic will love to have the ability to say, if I do A, B, and C, I'm going to get 1, 2, and 3. And that career path is important for them, and that motivates them. And I love those people too. I really do. Both are needed in companies, both are needed for organizations on both sides, and both become great leaders. There's not one that says this is a better leader and not a better leader. It really is about the situation, and where in that company or opportunity the cycle is, how mature the company is maybe, or how mature the department is. And so these are great questions that people should be asking, out the gate. Is there a clear path? If there's not a clear path, what does winning look like? And and that way you're not really being blindsided by poor fit.
I love that. I think that's a really, really interesting way of putting it. So it sounds like, if I'm hearing you right, if somebody has a higher risk tolerance, they're willing to take on more risk, it's okay. It's more likely to be okay if there's not a very clearly defined next step, because there's a level of confidence that, if you've got a high risk tolerance, you'll be able to make it work just because you're going to be in the game. You're going to be able to make the position work for you. It makes me kind of almost think of, in the book Lean In from Sheryl Sandberg, she talks about how she was applying for jobs in San Francisco. She had lived there for about a year, and she had not gotten anything. And then all of a sudden, she got multiple offers, one from 3 different law offices, and then one was from the startup in San Francisco called Google. Now, this was at a time when Eric Schmidt was the CEO and still interviewing every single person for the role. Now, their offer financially was not nearly what the law firm's offer was. Because she was not able to have the title or the compensation that the law firms were offering her. And so she laid out a spreadsheet. She was like, she went to Eric, she said, "Hey, I love your company, I love the mission, I think it's going in the right direction. But this is here are all the factors that I'm weighing for what I should pursue for my job fit. What are your thoughts on this?" And he just put his hands over her spreadsheets and he said, "Hey, if somebody offers you a seat on a rocket ship, you don't ask which seat, you just get on." And it was a really interesting point. But I think to those people that have a little bit higher of a risk tolerance, the point I'm trying to make here is that it sounds like, based on Nat's experiences, if you can pursue a role or a position at a company where maybe the outcomes aren't as defined or the path isn't as defined, but you've got that confidence in yourself that what's going to happen, and you believe in the industry and the company that's going to be able to grow and get there, so you're going to be essentially be willing to step up in the roles and positions as necessary, I think that could be a really great path for you. On the other side, obviously, if you don't have as much, if you have some risk aversion, that's okay too. I think that, therefore, it's important to know, when it comes to setting the expectations for that first job or internship, that maybe in the application process, in the interview process, you should be seeing, does this place have a very clearly defined, rungs and what the next steps are going to be? Would you say that's a good kind of way to summarize some of your advice, Nat?
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. I think that's, well spoken. Now remember, you can always ask as many questions as you possibly can, and you can try to get the best vision of that. But eventually, a decision has to be made whether you're going to step into that role or that opportunity. And frequently it's not so black and white. It's always going to be, there's a lot of gray in there and a lot of shades of gray when it comes to really understanding if I'm the right fit or not. And one of the things that I typically do when I reflect on risk, I ask. It may sound pretty simple, but I ask, so what? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? And am I okay with that worst thing? And if I look at it and say, well, if I don't like the job and then I leave the job, then if that's the worst thing, then so what? And then I ask the question again, so what then? And by the time you get to the second or third so what, you find out that you're really outlining your risk tolerance at that point. So it's kind of building a process to make sure that is it worth taking on that risk? And while I'm not advocating that it should not take questions less serious by any means. It's more about, if you can actually document down or write down what your concerns are on the risk, because typically it's fear. A fear is something that, is associated with the risk. And you can understand with that and you can grapple with that. I think you're going to find that you're going to feel more confident in your decision making.
Yeah. So I'd love to take a moment to ask the students a question. What do you feel like your risk tolerance is? Are you willing to take a lot of risk, or are you someone that's not as risk tolerant? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. I think it'd be really fascinating to learn about like the different levels of risk aversion and risk tolerance, where you're at on this spectrum. Because I think it's something that's good to know, to outline at the very beginning, because then once you've identified that, you can then identify what you need for your role that you're going to pursue. Because ultimately what we want to minimize is surprises into that first job or internship. So Nat, I'd love to ask you, speaking of the topic of surprises, how can we minimize any surprises when it comes to that first job or internship?
Yeah, that's, to me, it's about setting expectations. And, as a first-time job hunter or an intern, looking for a great internship, there's a lot of things that you're taking in, whether it's just the application itself or what you're researching on the company, is there some values here that kind of align with me? Is their mission good? Are they, they give back to the community? There's a lot of things that are going to go, through your head when you're looking at these things. But the one thing that, that I can't urge enough is really ask, like, what are you going to be doing every day? And does that really resonate with you? And so, if you are not getting the clear picture through, whether it's the application itself or, what you read or you do your research, the company or the employer, they can really help with that, setting that expectation. I mean, it should have, the clear responsibilities, both in time and what you're going to be doing. And if it doesn't, and you still have questions, this is where you need to ask questions. I can't urge that enough. And, it's like, what am I going to do all day long? Or like, what am I going to spend my time doing all day? How long will it take for me to be proficient esse? Where does this job go in 3 to 5 years? What should I expect out of this internship? And these are some of the questions that, that I'm hoping, as, we have an internship here at Central, as well as, as we do openings and interviews, that they're asking those questions. And, sometimes I even like to change the script a little bit, and I'll ask them if they have any questions before we even begin. Like, I'm assuming you've read the application or you've seen the job description. And so, what gaps do you have, and where can I help, you better understand what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis? And if I start out the conversation like that, it tends to help set those expectations.
That's awesome. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's a really good thing. And I think that leads to more or less this next point that I want to, kind of bring up, and that's daily routines. Because ultimately, when it comes to minimizing surprises and setting those expectations up front, then it comes to the point of fulfilling them, making sure that we're doing what we need to do on our side to put ourselves in the best position to succeed. Now, this can be on a physical level, this could be on a mental level, this could be on an emotional level. This can go on a variety of different levels, because ultimately, let's say something like this. Let's say we want to be in a position where we're going to be consistently working up a consistent promotional ladder. Maybe we want to know that there's a very clear step-by-step rung, as long as we hit these outcomes while at work. Now, being successful at work, a lot of times now, if we're physically in an office requires us to have positive body language, requires us to come in with a positive energy. If we're coming in negative Nancy all the time, if we're coming in just sluggish, lazy, tired, just not feeling so hot coming to work, we are taking energy away from those that we're working with. And so, Nat, I'd love to ask you, what are some routines that you pursue that helps you gets your mind right, gets your emotions right, gets your body right? What are the things that you do regularly to help yourself get into that routine so then you are ready to go when it comes to work, so then you can minimize any of those surprises, that you're really make sure those expectations come to fruition for what you like to accomplish in the future?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, I have to think about that a little bit too. For me, I think the getting ready for the day, and working, I like to have kind of that bank of energy, just I'm ready to go. I want to focus and want to focus and want to focus. So for me, I do start the day with, somewhat of routine, I do the same thing every morning, regardless of what I did the night before, whether, I was out playing volleyball or I was out with friends. It doesn't really matter. I try to do the same thing every morning. And that routine really helps make things easier on the mental side of things and also gets your body going. And I think that, having that routine, like going to the gym often or, even a diet, it just takes practice. But once you get there, you can then really focus on, on the things that you're supposed to be doing. But it makes you alert. It makes you recognize opportunities. It allows you to stay engaged, allows you to listen. And I think those are some, for me, some important keys to, to kind of put the game face on, when you're in that work setting. I think it's also, Garrett, it can be difficult sometimes, when the job or the internship is not quite what you expected, so the engagement goes down, and that's okay. It's going to happen to everybody at some time or another, right? And maybe that's another conversation we have, like how to handle that. But for me, for the routine, and for me to get ready and to be prepared, I suggest getting that routine going in the morning. Finding things that get the mind going first, get the body going first or second, I should say. Eat a little breakfast, and kind of get the tank filled, and kind of go at it.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Nat. I think that's really great. I'd love to ask the students a question. What is your morning routine? If you don't have a morning routine, what would you like your morning routine to be? I'm a big believer of same thing that you do, Nat. I don't do like a full exercise, but I do like about a 15-minute just exercise every single day. And it's just like a really quick thing. I found it to be really helpful for me because I was finding myself from an exercise perspective, I do a really hard workout for like 2 hours, but it'd be sporadic. Maybe I do it once every 3 weeks, but it was on random days. It wasn't consistent. And then I started just finding I was having way more energy when I was doing that exercise routine every single day, even if it was just 15 minutes. Habits are hard to start, but they're really hard to break. And so once you're in that routine, that's awesome. Another thing that I like to do, I know this may sound crazy, but I like to do cold showers. Before starting like a normal shower, I hit 90 seconds of on the cold cycle. And it gets my lymphatic system going. It gets all the hairs on my body raised. It's like almost like my whole body is a goosebump. But it makes me energized for the rest of the day, and it gets me excited. And it's also a cool gratitude exercise because once you get the warm water turned on, you're grateful for the warm water, and you realize, you know what, shoot, like if I had a choice of water, I get cold and warm. I can appreciate the warm when I've had the cold. And then that leads to the next point. I love to do a meditation in the morning, just a gratitude of like, who am I grateful for? It makes you happy. It makes me happier and can help kind of set my focus and intention for the day. Those are some of my morning routines. I find them to be really helpful just because it gets me into the zone of physically, mentally, and emotionally, how do I want to be for that day and setting that intention? Because if we don't, we kind of let that day ride us. We start with a bad conversation of somebody being negative. Then all of a sudden it rides into the second, third, fourth conversation. Then all of a sudden we turn it into a bad day because of the domino effect. But if we can start right, we can overcome potentially that adversity in the day, but we can also really accentuate positive conversations and things. So Nat, I'd love to jump into another key thing about just preparing for that first job or internship, and that is networking and building relationships with others at work. What is your advice for students as they pursue that first job or internship, in terms of networking and building relationships and connecting with other people? I know many of them are going to be doing this virtually, but still, is it important to network? Is it important to build these bonds?
Yeah. I think we're all trying to figure out how to do that today. You're right, in that remote, and not everybody can be. I guess it comes natural, from a virtual standpoint. But I do think they're important, and there's a couple of reasons. For me, the network and getting to know, really, I guess your tribe or your coworkers is, there's going to be a lot of synergy there. You can, 1 + 1 = 3 a lot of times when you start putting the right people in the right room and having those right conversations, because we all think differently. Some people are, really down into the details and do a really good job of creating, taking an idea and building it and breathing life into it. But you need those idea people, and, they may not agree on certain things, but once you get them together and get them aligned, really you really start seeing some powerful stuff. And so I think it's important that, you're going to have some sort of collisions, with your work. You got to be able to, whether it's just small things here or there, just random things. And I'm not trying to make them forced, from my seat, I try not to make them forced, but I do bring people into projects and I do introduce them, and I try to build some connectivity before they begin, whether it's storming or whether they're developing a process. So, for me, I think that the thing that about networking that may come from, people may think that traditionally, or maybe networking is, hey, that's going to lead to my next opportunity. And I don't know if I can completely agree with that. I think, there may not be an immediate opportunity, but I think that if you knew about the challenges and what's the wins for other departments and other people, you're going to think more, holistically of your job. You understand how it fits now. And I think you're going to find not only some motivation, but you're actually going to find, probably solve problems that are not just in front of you, but for other people, and I think those, having that ability really could really set you apart from others who are, not looking at that way, instead of just saying, hey, maybe here's my 5 p.m. drinking buddy, or whether, this is, we're going to be on the same intramural team, which both are fine. I'm not saying that don't do that at all by any means. It's more about, if you understood the challenges of other people, I think you're going to find, hey, I know how I can make things better for so-and-so or this individual or this department. And then that's when, in my opinion, when really careers and jobs really skyrocket from that point. They start seeing the bigger picture and they're connecting the dots.
That's a really insightful point there. I love how you put that, because so often, you're right, people, when they think about networking, they think about how can this person potentially serve me in my eventual and inevitable career path. And instead, you're phrasing it as to, how can I help somebody as I learn more about their challenges? So it requires 1, active listening skills, 2, empathy for what they're going through, and 3, the willingness to critically think about what you can do to potentially make their situation better. A very selfless activity to pursue, but a very valuable activity, because it leads to powerful, positive, eventual opportunities and inevitable opportunities. And that makes a lot of sense, because obviously you're in our executive mentor program. So you've got an executive mentor that you go to for guidance and insight, and that relationship builds and grows and allows you to be vulnerable and share insights, as well as concerns and things that you're going through, as well as have Troy share that with you. So it makes a lot of sense. But I think for all students that are out there listening to this, networking should not be thought about as a tool to help you necessarily get that next job or internship, but as an opportunity to build relationships with people to help them as they're working through their things, because givers gain. There's a book called Give and Take by Adam Grant, and he talks just about this notion that when we give more, we are much more likely to receive back. And again, not because we don't give for the sake of wanting to get back. We give because we know it's the right thing to do, and it does. Karma essentially ends up. Karma is a thing, I guess, is really what Adam Grant writes about. Is there's data to show that karma is a real thing.
Yeah, Garrett, just to touch on, I think that's a great point. I had a good friend of mine who always said that, there's not really luck. Luck is when opportunity meets preparation. And I think when you are out there and helping others, you're just preparing yourself. You're learning, you're listening. If you're actively listening, you're helping solve problems. And, by doing all that and immersing yourself in that kind of that, really in those behaviors, I guess is the way I could frame it. When those opportunities do pop up, people like, hey, that Garrett guy, I think he's a great guy for this. He really helped me out with this or this position here. And I think, to your point, the karma side of it, we can call it karma, in that direction. I think it's, it's just, just caring about other people. And I think it does return. So maybe karma is the right word for it, Garrett, to put it out that way. Yeah.
It's not as blood-sucking. The business world is not as blood-sucking as perhaps sometimes the movies make it out to seem. Karma does come back. Your reputation does mean something. Karma is a thing, whether you put good juju out there or you put bad juju out there, it's going to come back. So I think that's a really good point. But on that same kind of like tangential corner curve, it's related, is this notion of failure. I think this is something that as students, we're so concerned about. We think, okay, geez, you know, what if I mess this up or what if I mess that up? You know, it'll be all over. We build up in our mind, we shouldn't be failing at all. And as we talked about earlier, perfection is the enemy of progress. There's no such thing as perfection. It never will be. But I'd love to learn your thoughts. One, what is failure to you? And two, how can we overcome failure? How can we overcome that fear of failure as students in pursuing this first job or internship?
So Garrett, it's a really good question about failure. And, you know, for me, I think, you know, trying something and doing something that just didn't work out is really not the failure. It's not taking away the learnings from what could be done differently to change the outcome. To me, that's more of a failure, you know, to make sure that, you know, things are, I guess, really just staying, you want to get out of your comfort zone, you know, and you really got to try new stuff. It's like working out or daily routines, you know, once you get into it. And failing is very similar to a new routine as well. For me, you know, there's a certain amount of, you know, we talked about risk earlier, and I think that's also important for the failure side of things. I mean, there's some things you can't fail at. You know, in medicine, you don't want a doctor to fail. So, you know, that could be pretty, you know, could be pretty bad. However, if doctors and medicine are not testing, or they're trying stuff, or going through a very calculated, you know, situation where they're addressing the risk and doing something new, medicine doesn't progress, right? And so, you know, having that ability to really look at things and assess the risk will help you in your failure. You know, going back to saying, you know, what's the worst thing that possibly can happen? If it's not so bad, then I think, you know, it's okay. But, you know, just take a you know, assessment of, you know, what's the worst thing that can happen, you know, and if it happens, it's okay if you fail, but make sure you take the learnings away from you, you know. And one thing that I see, you know, and sometimes in my team that I do get concerned about is doing the same thing over again, expecting a different outcome, you know, and you know, so I do question that, and I challenge them. It's like, you know, what else could have gone wrong here that we're not seeing? Or how do we set ourselves up to make sure that we're capturing it, you know, and we're, you know, even the things that we know are going to happen, but also the things that are, you know, may not happen. So reflection is super important for me when it comes to that, you know, in failure, and taking the time and looking at it, and then trying to dig in, you know, not only on, you know, that first order consequence, but maybe even the second or third order consequence. You know, what happened because of this and because of that, and kind of the dominoes. And if you can, you know, you can get to that point and take the time to do that, I think you'll have a better appetite for failure.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a healthy way to look at failure. So speaking of learning, what motivates you to continue to learning more about your field?
I love solving problems. And, you know, for me, I love new things. So being in, you know, really digital marketing, that has allowed me to learn a lot about about us. You know, I should have been a psychology major probably instead of economics and finance, but I really think it's very cool to understand how people, how they do things, what drives their behaviors. And the digital marketing side really kind of, you know, taps into that. You know, why people buy certain things, or they do certain different, they look at different websites, or how they shop, you know, and then, you know, then you take that data, and then how do you're using that data to kind of leverage it, you know, in other parts. And that's where the IT part of it comes into play. It's, you know, for me, it's, you know, a lot of taking the data and seeing it, and now I'm actually building structures and processing that piece of it, and really protecting it as well. You know, that's another part of that, you know, the privacy. And I think there's, you know, that just gets me going. It really does. You know, I like to see that. I get to work with Google, and I get to work with Bing, and I get to work with, or Microsoft, excuse me, and Amazon, you know, and seeing some of the cutting edge on the way, you know, they take this data and how it impacts people daily. So it's a lot of fun.
I'd love to ask the students a question real quick. What motivates you to continue wanting to learn more about your field of interest? Post in the comment section. What, essentially, put another way, what about your field of interest, your area of interest, makes you most curious? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. So Nat, this was an awesome workshop. I think this was really valuable in terms of how students can best prepare themselves for that first job or internship. I guess any final notions, any final parting wisdom or thoughts you have for our students is just about, anything that they can do to prepare for that first job or internship.
Yeah. So, just a couple things, I think. The first thing is, there's no better time to fail. You're at the perfect age of learning, and really a lot of people expect, that you're going to ask great questions, and you're not going to figure out right away. And people really want you to succeed. So by you taking the opportunity to really do your best, and even in failure, you're going to find a lot of people that's willing to support you. So, feel like you're not alone. The second thing, I think you hit on it earlier, Garrett, is listening. Active listening is super important for me. It's about taking that listening and being empathetic with it. And not even, and I also want to put a plug in here about empathetic versus being sympathetic. There is a difference between those. And Brene Brown has a great little video. You should look it up about that. But being empathetic really gets you in with them, not about you. It's all about them. Where can you help? What can you do better? Feel their pain, get in their shoes. And I think if you can harness that perspective, I think you're going to be, a step ahead, because I think it's still a tough concept. But you're going to traditionally know. You're going to really know. You're going to really know what's important to others and how you can best help them. And by doing that, you're going to help yourself. You're going to learn a lot more, and you're going to be genuine. And I think that's some couple takeaways.
That's awesome. Nat, thank you so much for sharing. The final thing I want to ask for you is how can our students learn more about your work and you? I know a lot of our students are on LinkedIn. Are you all right if they connect with you on LinkedIn?
Of course. Yeah, definitely. I'm more than happy to connect. And if you have any questions about this or anything else, please reach out. And if there is anything that has internship, opportunities there or postings or anything like that, you can be candid. Just send a message. I'd be more than happy to let you know if there's any opportunities.
Perfect. Awesome. Nat, thank you so much for being here. Students, thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. See you, everybody.
See ya. Thanks.